back to the 8-Man Breakdowns podcast. This is where we discuss all phases of the game of football, including philosophy, play concepts, questions, and more. Today's guest is Coach Travis Desbien. Coach Desbien is the head coach at Hill City High School in Hill City, Kansas, and has now served as the head coach for the previous 6 years. He's actually had a lot of success recently with consecutive 10-2 seasons and semifinal appearances in both of those seasons in 8-Man Division I. Well, Coach, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking ball today, Coach.
All right, so let's get started. We'll start with the first question. Just start by talking about yourself. Tell us about your football background, kind of how you got started coaching.
Football background. You could probably trace back to little me, playing Madden back in the day on Super Nintendo when I was 10 years old. Loved playing the game. Loved watching it. Wasn't old enough yet to play the game. My parents kind of kept me away from the game until I was about in junior high. And then when I got into junior high, got to put some pads on for the first time. And at this point, as a kid, I was itching to get to play because, watching it on TV, playing the games. I already had that love for the game. And so when I got to put the pads on in junior high, it just took off from there. I loved it even more. Got to play in high school. And loved every bit of it there. Should probably preface this by saying I grew up in a small community that played 8-man football, so it gave me a good insight into 8-man side, but also as a kid watching 11-man. So, and there's not a whole lot of difference between 8 and 11-man. You just take a couple kids off the field and you tweak plays and whatnot, but they can work both ways. But grew up in a small community in DeMar, which I went to. The school that DeMar filters into is called Palco High School, small rural Northwest town, and played football there in high school and was moderately successful at it. And was lucky enough in my junior year that we made the state championship game. And then from there, elected not to play football collegiately, went on to college at Washburn University, and when I was going to school there, decided to get into education because I knew coaching was something I wanted to do in my future, and teaching. And then when I landed my first teaching job in Hill City, coaching was absolutely something that was a non-negotiable thing that I wanted to have when I was looking for jobs. And I was lucky enough when I landed in Hill City that there was a football assistant coaching position available to me. So joined that staff then, which would have been 9 years ago at this point, and started my coaching experience then. And then I was an assistant coach there for 3 years before I took over as a head football coach, and the rest has been history since then.
That's cool. I didn't know you went to Palco, and I didn't even know that Hill City was your only place you've been. Is that the only place you've been then?
That's it. First and only so far.
And this is actually now the fourth school that I've been at. But anyway,
well, it could be a bonus and it could be a negative, because when you think about it, I've seen very little from the outside as far as how a lot of other things are done, other than what you learn at clinics and from other coaches you speak to. But then again, I've got lucky that I've been there one place so long that I feel like part of the community, and all the kids are. I've got a good relationship because I've known these kids since they're little now. By the time I get my hands on them as a high school coach, so it's good and bad in both ways, I guess you could say.
Yeah, no, that is an awesome thing, and I hope that I can be at a place long enough to feel that same way. Coach, was there anyone in your life that led to your path as a coach?
Great question. As a coach, I would say that the coach that impacted me the most growing up was, I had two high school football coaches. One that was my coach for my first 3 years in high school, DJ Baskell, was a completely different type of coach than the next one I'm going to talk to you about, but was a great guy, extremely passionate guy, great coach, old school, tough type coach, pushed me, really got the best of me, but I also really respected him because I realized as a player at a young age what type of work that Coach Baskell put into the program, and it made me really respect the profession of coaching, and he made me want to be my best. And then after he left my junior year, The next coach that I had there was Coach Staub, which was our assistant coach under Basketball, and he was a what I would consider maybe a more of a uh, players coach. He had more of a personal connection with us players, and I saw the personal side of coaching that you can impact players and kids that are young, and he impacted my life just because I looked up to him as like a father figure type guy, and made me realize at a young age that coaching can have a huge impact on kids and their lives. And those two different type of impacts, one for the respect of the profession and the game, and the other one for how you can impact people, made me really interested in coaching in the future because I wanted to have that impact on somebody else later down the line myself as a coach.
I'm going to change gears here a little bit here. So, what, if anything, would you say separates your program from others? Something maybe you guys do differently, scheme terminology wise, program wise, than others. What's something that separates you guys?
Great question. You know, as a coach, we're I feel like coaching as a profession, we steal things from one another, right? So it's hard to be unique as a coach in this day and age because good coaches, we all steal from each other and we take bits and pieces of each other's programs and we implement them into our own. So it's hard for me to sit here and tell you that I'm special. I do something unique that nobody else does because I'm as guilty as everybody else of taking what I like, what other coaches do well, and implementing it to my own program. So I can't sit here and honestly say that I invented the wheel when I really didn't. So I don't know that I have anything unique that nobody else does. Maybe just the totality of the program, I would say I feel is unique because I've taken the little bits and pieces of everybody and what I've created what I call ring neck football. It's the culture we have, it's the traditions we built. The little bits and pieces aren't unique in any way, but together, put together is a unique culture that I feel like we've created here, where kids growing up here in Hill City want to be a ring neck football player, and that's the biggest thing I wanted to do when I took over as coach here. I wanted to get people excited for ring neck football, because Hill City for a long time before I was here, it was always a basketball town, and rightfully so. We have the most winning high school basketball coach of Kansas history here in Hill City, so it's always been about basketball in Hill City, and that's something to be proud of. But I also wanted to bring my passion of football here to Hill City, and I wanted those kids to not just want to grow up and be basketball players. And I feel like right now we're in that place where young kids want to be ring neck football players, and they look forward to being a ring neck football player. And I'm a part of that piece. I feel I'm proud of that, and I hope we can keep that going, and hopefully that program piece will be here long after I leave it.
So, tell us a little bit about this season. Would you change anything if you got another chance at this season? Tell us about this year.
This year we had a pretty good year. I can't say I'm disappointed, or I don't know that I would change anything in particular about this season. I was really proud of our guys. We made it all the way to the sub-state game for the second year in a row. Lost to the eventual state champion for the second year in a row. So um, it's always bittersweet to see the team that beat you win the state championship game, because on one hand, you think if you could have beat them, that would have been you too. But on the other, that they beat the other guy on the other side of the state, so you don't feel as bad about losing to the eventual state champion. So wins and losses record, extremely proud of my guys. We graduated a good senior class the year before, and we were able to reload this year and run it back for another successful season. And then the other thing is I was really proud of the guys that stepped up this year and um, fill in a lot of those shoes that we had. So personal pride in a lot of our kids. I was really proud of somehow our younger kids stepped up this year and were able to fill some from holes in our team that I thought was going to be a bigger problem coming into the year, but they stepped up and filled shoes a lot better than I thought that they would.
Piggybacking off of that, what specifically do you look forward to most next season?
Great question. So every year, it's immediately after the football season ends, my brain goes into immediately into what next year is going to be like. I think a lot of us coaches do that. We reassess how the year went, and then immediately that season's lost. So you're thinking about what are we going to look like next year. So I start drawing up preliminary depth charts and start writing notes to myself about what I need kids to improve on in exit meetings to let them know what we need from them next year. So that's going to be a big thing next year. We graduated some spectacular seniors this year that are going to be tough to replace, and I don't think we have any underclassmen that can fill those shoes necessarily. So it's going to be a job of coaches and players putting a lot of work in this summer to fill the shoes that were left by the seniors before. And things I'm looking forward to is building off of the success that our junior class had. We had some really good leaders step up for us last year, and we're really going to be challenged to fill some spots on the line because we're losing a big portion of our offense and defensive line. So that's going to be a challenge for us, but really looking forward to building around our junior class next year and hopefully establishing a good running game next year, losing as many offensive and defensive linemen that we did.
So were you guys able to stay healthy this year?
Yeah, we were. We were pretty lucky this year as far as football goes. We had a couple kids get dinged up, and in an 8-man football, you always got to try to stay healthy every year. It's a key to every successful team's season is staying healthy because, as you know, in 8-man football, you don't have a lot of numbers to deal with. This year, we were sitting at 26 kids on our football team, and a lot of teams play kids both sides of the ball. You try to get your best athletes where you can, and sometimes that means playing 8 kids, the majority both sides of the ball. If you're lucky and you've got depth, you might be able to have half those kids play one side and half the other side. But for the most part, you're going to see a lot of the same kids on the side of the ball. But this year, as far as significant injuries, I don't think we had anybody that had to miss multiple games from significant injuries. Everybody's going to have bumps and bruises and sprains and whatnot. But we were able to keep the majority of our team really, really healthy, and a couple kids had dinged up injuries that we had sit outs for portions of games, but no long-term injuries. Probably the most significant injury we had on our team was broken foots or strained backs. We didn't really have anything too significant that kept any of our playmakers out for long. So we were really, really blessed in that case, which it wasn't always the case because a couple years ago, which is probably one of my more talented teams that I've coached, we had really high expectations going into the year. 2 years ago, this would have been that 2020 team. I had sky high expectations for that team because we had a lot of guys that were 3-4 year starters that were peaking at seniors and juniors, and I thought we would be able to make a run for the state championship game. And we just had so many significant injuries. We had broken legs, torn ACLs, broken collarbones, and we limped into the end of the year there. And I think we had 4 or 5 starters that ended up with season-ending injuries. So we were playing our last playoff game there with a lot of young kids, which in the future helped us out. Here we are right now with a lot of those kids that were having to step up, got those minutes on that team that they probably shouldn't have at the time, but gave those younger kids valuable time to play early, which is now we're reaping the benefits from that.
So you said you had 26 guys out this year. So is the 2-4 defense kind of something that fits your players better, or your number or selection of players? Is that something that you guys kind of built your defense around?
Yeah, so I can't take credit for our defense. I've got a really great defensive coordinator that puts a ton of effort into coaching our defense and game planning week to week. And when he had came on to staff and joined me 2 years ago as my defensive coordinator, his name's Craig Amrine. His son's an excellent quarterback and outside linebacker for us. When he got here, he was coming from the 11-man football game and didn't really understand the 8-man game all that well. And we had sat down and talked football, and I was trying to explain the differences in 8-man and 11-man. And he was trying to come up with what he thought would be a defense that could be successful in 8-man football. And coming from a 3-5 defense, he kind of landed on that version for 8-man, which is a 2-4 defense. Similar principles with some kids taken off the field. And, we tweaked around where to put kids, lining up in gaps, alignments, and responsibilities. And he's came up with a defense that's unique to most teams. It's when we started this, several years ago, you didn't see very many teams running that type of defense. But I feel like in the past years, some teams have kind of seen it succeed in a lot of ways and become intrigued by the idea of running that defense. And so now we're seeing some teams pop up in Kansas that are experimenting with that type of defense, and it can be really good with the right players. And at that time when he came in, we had a lot of good athletes, but in Hill City, we don't our kids just aren't very big. They're strong, good athletes, but we don't have a lot of 220, 250-pound kids. Give you an example. This past year, on our football team, I think our heaviest kid on the field we put on the field was probably 210 pounds. So we're just not very big, and we've never traditionally been very big weight wise. We've got a lot of good athletes, but they're 170, 180-pound kids. And taking kids off the line, which are traditionally your big kids, and putting more athletic type kids on the field, it just fit our personnel of what we had. And honestly, looking in the future of our upcoming program, I don't see a lot of big kids coming up that will probably force us to change that type of defense. But if we ever get a bunch of big kids and we don't have very many fast athletic kids, that's what, as coaches, we need to adapt to our players, and that's what we'll do. But right now, it fits our athletes really, really well.
So that's awesome that you mentioned the translation of an 11-man defense, into 8-man and adjusting the numbers, and the responsibilities a little bit to fit the 8-man game, which because I think a lot of coaches, or at least in the past, don't necessarily know how easily the game could transfer both ways. I agree. I think everything transfers back and forth. You just got to kind of tweak a few things and adjust the guys you have on the field. So
Exactly. And as an offensive guy, I get excited every week watching college football and NFL on Sundays because I'll be sitting here and you're watching the Chiefs and you see Andy Reid draw up these wild 2-point conversion or goal line plays, and I get excited. I've got a notepad next to me every Saturday and Sunday, and if I see a play that looked great, I quickly just start jotting down ideas of how I can translate that and make that work for my team. And honestly, it's not as hard as you think. It really isn't. Like, you've got two more guys you take off the line of scrimmage. You might have one less guy skill wise to do with something, but it's doable. And it may not be perfectly the exact 1-to-1 of what it was in 11-man, but you can make things work, and you can be creative. You have to put some thought into things and some time, but it's absolutely doable, both offense and defense.
100% agree. So we're talking offense and you watching games on Saturdays, Sundays, and stuff. Kind of talking about your reflection on this year, building an offense. I guess at the end of the season, how do you know if you want to stick with the concept or add something new going forward?
Great. So that's part of that postseason reflection I do every single year. One of the things is I think about the kids coming back, right? What type of kids do I have coming back? Am I going to miss my quarterback that is a great thrower, but maybe not such a good runner? If so, are we going to become a more run heavy team? Are we going to become a more pass heavy team? Do I have a kid that's a big physical downhill runner, or do I have a kid that's a scat back who works really good in space? And I take all of these kids' strengths into consideration. And knowing their strengths, I try to figure out an offense that I think will allow those types of skill sets to succeed. So I'll give you an example. In the past, I've had some big physical downhill running backs. Strong kids weren't really good jukers or in space. So I had developed a lot of five tight formations where he could just plow through kids and gain some dirty 4 or 5 yards. But when he graduated, I was left with a tailback that was lightning in a bottle, super quick, lightning fast, but he was 5'7", 135 pounds. And that type of offense wasn't going to work. So immediately I went to the drawing board and I need to take kids out of the box. So I have rarely that next year did I have any five tight formations. Almost everything was three tight formations, and I was taking guys out and putting them in space and trying to find ways to get the running game successful by taking people out of the box because I wanted that running back to work in space. And the same thing goes for our passing game too. When I know my quarterback, is better throwing downfield, we'll create concepts going into the offense that I think will make him successful. Or maybe he's better. Like currently, or my quarterback currently is really good at throwing on the run. So we do a lot of play action and boots because he's really good on the run. I think it's just natural for me as a coach to approach the off season in a way where I just need to assess what we do well and then just try to get creative and allow that to turn over my offense each year to try to make it successful. And I would say on average, maybe we we change between 50 and 30% of the playbook each year based off of kids coming back and their strengths.
The last question, biggest tips or advice to any aspiring football coaches?
Biggest tip that I could give any young coach is when you pick up a team, whether it be an assistant coach or head coach, is make sure you get to know your players. I think that is a very overlooked thing for young or first time coaches is they want to come in and make sure they don't screw up X's and O's and organization, but you overlook the human aspect of coaching and you need to get to know your players and you need to let your players know that you care about them individually because if they don't think that you care about them individually, it's going to be hard for them to give you the effort you're looking for consistently, day in and day out, game days, practices, all of those things where you're going to ask a lot from them. They need to know that you care and you love them. So you're going to get the maximum out of each and every one of those kids.
Coach, thanks again for your time and coming on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Thanks a lot for having me. Look forward to catching more of your videos in the future.
Thanks, Coach. And that's going to do it for this episode of the 8-Man Breakdowns podcast. If you have any questions for me, feel free to leave your questions in the comments below. That's the easiest way to reach me. If you enjoyed this video or took away anything from it, please click subscribe. Check out some of my previous videos right here in the middle of the screen. And like always, thanks for watching.